You're watching Experience Comic Culture and Sales, streaming live daily to Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter.
Boy, it's a good way. I felt the kind of way I felt about the books this week, man. If you sound like this, you guys don't want to hear me talking about them. Of course, you ever notice how when you're coughing a lot, you don't like anything? This is In Stores This Week, where we talk about new books that are in stores this week. Or rather, the other three talk about books that are in stores this week while I nod and make some grunting noises because I've used my whole voice doing this cold opening because I forgot to ask one of the other guys to do it. These are the problems with my brain. Welcome to the show.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to In Stores This Week. Kyle won't be talking a lot today, so we're going to move through the show with him grunting a few times and swaying a lot.
Yeah.
So, by the way, hello to Triple B, to Ed, John, and Cool. Glad to see you guys here. We are joined, of course, by producer Kyle, producer Jay, and Sean, who I believe is kept in Jay's basement and only gets to come out to do the show occasionally.
Dan, give away all the
So, there's a lot of fun stuff going on at CinemaCon. News-wise, we'll be covering that tomorrow on the Dan Wickline show. But comic-wise, I think we should just jump right into the books.
I loaded up the wrong slides.
What?
The slides were from last week. Can we go back and talk about those again? Oh my goodness.
What's up, Eddie?
So I think Kyle was working, putting that together. This is Adelbrain. His brain went boom.
This is the same one. Why is this a thing? Please hold.
Please stay on the line. The operator will be with you in a moment. And thank you for using your phone book whenever possible. You realize that so many people would not get that. That never called 411 for a phone number.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, there's a new name. How's it going there, Derek? Haven't seen that name before.
That
Welcome,
is
Derek.
Should we talk about what's coming up on our channel this week to fill in some time real quick?
Sure.
So believe it or not, we actually have videos planned this week, and they're all actually uploaded. So yesterday was part one of Jay's favorite DC animated Superman movies. So definitely check that out. Today was our short, which is all villains. It was Toyo Harada, The Life and Death of Toyo Harada from Valiant, and volume 1 of Sinestro from New 52.
Nice.
Tomorrow is going to be my favorite captains video. I actually meant to do it last week, and I got so hooked on the final episode of Picard that I threw that up last Friday. So the captain's video goes today. Thursday is Jay's short, and his is very Valiant centric, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
It is. Who is it? I forget who you picked.
Exo and Bloodshot.
Exo and Bloodshot. And then Friday will be part 2 of Jay's best or favorite DC animated Superman books. So, and then we've actually got 5 videos for next week that we've got planned as well. So, full week for us this week.
Okay, we got the books now. So, but before we jump in, Sean, I got one question for you. I've been wanting to ask somebody who has seen the Picard finale.
Mm-hmm.
I have not seen it. I don't have Paramount Plus. I'm not caught up, but I see on TikTok all these people showing the scene of Data flying the ship through the Borg ship into the center.
That was really cool.
Okay, but everybody superimposes a song on top of that scene. I've seen it with the Beastie Boys, with AC/DC, just I Need a Hero. I mean, is there an actual song that plays during that scene?
Yes,
No,
there is.
because they're going back and forth a lot between him doing that and what's going on inside the cube with Picard and his son and the Borg Queen. So they're going back and forth quite a bit.
Oh,
Damn
okay.
it. My joke got ruined. I was going to say the song is Banditos. Just because that's a joke that only Dan and I will really understand.
Yep. All right, let's jump into the books here. We start off with Dark Horse's Blue Book, which has been an odd book since we got it. It's a two-part type book. Its first part is a Michael Avon Oeming, beautifully drawn, monotone book. It's in black, white, and blue, and it's the highlight of the book of the two. And there's always a second story. And at this point, I don't think I even read the second story. I'm not sure if it's a continuing thing, if they're just backup stories. Kyle, I think, is having a heart attack. But the main story is following this couple that gets possibly abducted in the woods while driving, and we're just following them trying to get back to their lives. So the newest issue was probably the better of the three so far. You know, we're actually got kind of things moving forward. It's making sense. But it's still not quite sure why this book exists and why the backstory. The second story is never on par. But what did you think, Jay?
So I thought the Blue Book story was good. Apparently, this is based off of an actual event that happened, is what I've been hearing. But man, that second story, what the hell? Like, the art and the story doesn't match. As in, the art is telling a completely different story. Because I actually read it. It's like, think having the narration of how it's made playing over a John Wick movie. That's how different this art and story was to me. It's like telling the story of a cannibal in the art, but then talking about like the French Revolution in the story. I think the second stories are completely unnecessary, and I wish Blue Book was the entirety of this book because I'm much more interested in that. But I really did like this issue. Aside from that second story that made no sense.
Sean, have you been caught up on Blue Book?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm with you in that I agree that this issue of the Blue Book portion is the best of the three so far. And like I said, like y'all have said, the second story makes no sense whatsoever. And what makes it even worse is by the time the first story starts getting really, really, really good, is when they cut it off and you have to switch gears into this other story that you just don't care about. I looked over about 2 pages worth of the second story, and then I was pretty much taken out of it, and I just kind of skimmed through it. So I don't really have much to say on there. Jay pretty much summed it up as to what it was, but I would love more of this first story as the entire book, because I've never seen art like this where it's just these 3 particular colors, and it works. It's gorgeous. I would love to see more of that. And just generally, I want to know now what's actually going on with this story, because it's starting to get like X-Files kind of good to me.
Sean,
Check out Frank Miller's Sin City for colors like that.
well, I was going to recommend, Sean, there's a book called Sumo, if you can find it, that is very similar in its art style. It might even be Michael Avon Oeming who drew it. So you should check that out. For me, the thing about this book is it's Tinian, right? And I'm burnt out on Tinian. It's either phenomenal and the best thing you've ever read, or it's less than average. And if I'm going to read less than average, I can do that with other companies and with other writers that I have more interest in the stories they're telling. So for me, the fact that half of this book is just an absolute bummer is really problematic. And the fact that half of this book looks like it could be really groundbreaking and the other half looks like it could be burnt in a fire somewhere, that just makes it worse. So,
Okay, who are we getting the echo off of? Is it Sean?
It might be. If it's me, I mean, do y'all want me to run and go get some headphones real quick? I forgot them out in the living room.
No, just hit the mute button when you're not talking,
or run and get headphones.
or run and get headphones. Your choice.
It's fine. You want to take me off camera real quick? I'll be right back.
Just put Han on.
No, he's in with Jay.
Yeah, he's in with me.
Okay, let's go ahead and move on to our second book. Honestly, for me, this was the best book of the week. This is Star Wars: The High Republic Adventures. This is Quest of the Jedi. It's a one-shot from Claudia Gray and Rico Asio. And Kyle can speak about the speculation on it if he wants.
So this is one of those books that's getting a lot of early spec heat. And I don't generally follow that, right? Like it's not my thing. But with these Star Wars High Republic books, one thing we've seen when they have these announcements of potentially a first appearance or when the speculators jump on them, they're really awesome books. So that's always a good indicator if you don't normally get Star Wars High Republic as to when maybe to start looking at them.
Yeah, the High Republic is an interesting new era that we're going to be exploring in live action soon with the Acolyte. If you look at the cast listing for the Acolyte, there are 8 different people listed that are going to be playing Jedis or Jedi. This is an era where there are a ton of Jedi. You know, it's not like what we're used to where they're sparse. It's like, you know, it's common. There's a lot of them. And it's just a very different feel for Star Wars. It's definitely still Star Wars, but it's a different feel. And this is a neat episode because it's all about these two, Barnabas and I don't remember his Padawan's name, but on a quest for a certain artifact that takes them to a very unique little planet with people who have a very unique connection to the Force. It's a standalone one shot, and it is a really strong Star Wars story. So
to me, this felt like this could be the setup for the, they talked at not D23, the other one, Star Wars Celebration, about going back to that origin of the Jedi story.
Mm-hmm.
Right? This feels like we're getting towards that, even though we're not quite there, right? We know what Jedi are in this book. So that's even before this. But this series, this era, especially in the Adventures books, could serve as a nice bridge. And this really feels like that's what they're aiming for.
The best way to equate it, and it's not an even parallel, but think about the Jedi at this time period being like the Green Lantern Corps. You know, they're out helping people. They're out, but there's a ton of them. It's not just Hal Jordan. It's all of them. It's Kilowog and just down the line. So what did you think of it, Sean?
So, believe it or not, this is actually the first Star Wars comic that I've actually ever read. So with that said, it was actually a pretty decent jumping off point. You know, just getting into it, you can come into this having watched the movies, and I think you'll be okay. I love the art. This book was beautiful to look at. Great story. The uniqueness of that planet and that artifact was really intriguing because, up until now, I always thought the Force was something that literally only someone who was trained as a Jedi or a Sith could actually tap into. So to see some of the stuff that they were able to do with the Force in this one, I thought was really, really cool. And I'm not the biggest Star Wars guy. I lean more towards Star Trek. So for it to actually get me into it like that, I thought was really cool and definitely worth reading for anybody who's a Star Wars fan, or even if you're not a Star Wars fan, it's just a really good fantasy story.
Jeff makes a really good point there. I forgot that the Star Wars the adventures and stuff moved over from IDW to Dark Horse, and Dark Horse has always done good Star Wars books. IDWs were a little hit or miss for me. So now that I'm seeing it's back at Dark Horse, makes a lot of sense. Jay, what do you think?
So I think it's always cool to learn about characters that haven't been in the movies or their last name isn't Skywalker.
But you can just take the name Skywalker if you want.
Well, yeah, but I thought this was a neat story. Definitely one of the better books we've got this week. I mean, this is one of those things that, just like Star Trek, I like Star Wars, but I have a super limited knowledge. And even with that, I still enjoyed the book. Like, even not having a whole lot of Star Wars knowledge, this is still a good read. So, I mean, take that for what you will.
All right. So let's go ahead and move on here to Gargoyles number 5. With this is the David Nakayama cover. I'm still not gelling with the series. I want to. Like I said, I enjoyed them when I was a kid, but I have a hard time with this one. It is so soap opera-y with all the relationships and the connections and all the extra people. It's kind of like the same thing with the Turtles that I was not liking before Armageddon Game, which was there was so many extra. It's like, can we just focus on the 4 turtles? Well, here, can we just focus on the original gargoyles? But we've got additional gargoyles and robotic gargoyles and just, I don't know. This one just isn't for me. Jay?
Well, see, the thing is, some of them were already in the cartoon. Some of these are just newer characters for the show. I thought this was okay. I did notice, though, that there's a part of this book when they're in a courtroom. They use the same panel twice. The same exact panel, except they take the word bubbles out of one of them. I didn't know if that was like a call to Disney recycling footage or somebody just didn't feel like drawing another panel. But I thought that was kind of neat. But I've said this before that I enjoy this, but I wish they would have made this either more new reader friendly, like starting right after the cartoon, because this feels like years after the cartoon ended. So I don't think this is very new reader friendly. If you've never watched Gargoyles, jumping on this is gonna be a hard one. I understand that. I'm kind of hoping that the more this goes on, maybe we'll start centering more on just a couple of the characters, not all of them. Though I will say this one, the story of what's going on with Goliath actually interests me. So I'm excited to see where that goes to. And I got to agree with my man Castle there. That is a beautiful cover. But yeah.
So I think the idea of continuing the Gargoyle story from where the series left off was a good concept that has overall been poorly executed. Whereas Darkwing Duck, because episodes of that and because those issues have been so independent, they felt a little stronger, at least tied to the original source material. This has felt like if Gargoyles were coming out now and people were writing Gargoyles for today's stories, and it doesn't really mesh, right? I don't need gargoyles that are socially aware of the things that I have to watch on the news. I need gargoyles who are trying to stop purse stealing in New York City. That's kind of, and that's not exactly what the original show was. I understand that. But the original show came out at a time when it was made for kids and it was simple and they weren't dealing with such complex issues. I feel like now they're digging into more complex issues and trying to appeal to me now when what I want them to appeal to is me then.
Yep.
I want the nostalgia, not the, oh, hey, here's these characters you like thrown into things that are actually part of your life now. And so for me, the overall thing with this book is I love gargoyles. This just feels ill-conceived.
Yeah. So I'm kind of in the same boat. This is a very kind of ho-hum issue. It almost feels like these are scripts that haven't gotten used for TV yet. They almost seem like they would be better served to be done as a show versus a comic from panel to panel. With that said, I mean, the art is gorgeous. I mean, that's the one thing you can definitely say is consistent with every issue is the art is phenomenal. But I'm kind of left sitting here waiting to find out what the actual story is, and I'm still not getting it. We're 5 issues in. It feels like they start to go somewhere, and then every couple of issues they go a completely different direction. So it's been hard for me to really jump into it. Maybe now with what they're doing with Goliath, we'll go somewhere. But that remains to be seen. I thought we were going a completely different direction at the end of issue 2. So.
All right. We should probably, can we move back and forth on the slider? Yeah, we should go to Armageddon Game 7 first because story-wise, this takes place before 139. We all talked about Armageddon, the last book that came out, the Armageddon Alliance, and how good it was, and how that's the kind of stuff they needed to do. They didn't keep it going. This felt a lot more talky again, a lot more waiting. I'm just ready. The best thing I saw in either of these 2 issues was when I went to the checklist to see which book I should read first, and saw that there's only one more book in the series after this. That's all I got to say about this one. So take it away.
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot to say. I think that this issue is better than some of the other ones in the actual Armageddon game. I don't know. It just feels like I've said this consecutively the last couple times. It feels like they just took too long to get here. And I think that maybe going back and reading this all at once might make it better. I don't know. But it just feels like we should have had issues like this sooner. I will say this, the ending of this one with Metalhead just ripped my heart a little bit, but I liked Metalhead in the cartoon as a kid, so I thought it was another solid issue, but again, I just wish it hadn't taken so long to get here.
Yeah. I'm actually with Jay. I really enjoyed this particular issue and what they did with it. Granted, it was like Dan had said and Jay had said like a month or so ago, it feels like it's going to take 15, 16 issues to build up, and then everything's going to happen within about 2 issues, maybe 3. That's kind of where we are, and it's like, that's cool, but you could have just started here and that'd have been fine. But overall, this was another solid issue in the series for me, at least. I liked where it went, and I will say this because I'll have to eat my words here in a second. But when I got done reading this, I thought, Shredder was about to do something again and throw a whole new twist in everything. So that's where I was before we went into 139. So I will definitely say this: if you read them back to back, cool. If not, you had to wait to read them. That the hang on the end with Shredder will actually kind of keep you wondering a little bit.
So this one's back to being written by Kevin Eastman. I think this series suffers from a too many cooks situation. They did too many books with too many cooks and didn't have one solid cohesive idea. They're Sony Pictures trying to make Marvel movies. You know, there might have been an overall story arc pitch by someone, but they let the others have too much range. And in doing so, you have books like the tie-in books, the tie-in miniseries that have been so good, and then this main miniseries that have been awful, and then some of the main series that have been really good, and some of them that have been awful. It's because there's not one clear, concise voice overseeing it all. The thing that made Jonathan Hickman's X-Men run work wasn't that Jonathan Hickman is some kind of genius. It was that it had one clear and concise vision from the beginning that was great. And then it was overseen no matter who jumped into it. Hickman was still guiding the ship. Now, Jonathan Hickman's a great writer. So is Kevin Eastman. But if he isn't steering the ship, then it tends to go all over the place. I feel like this was a little bit of Bill Parcells. If you want me to cook the dinner, you got to let me shop for the groceries. And then they're like, actually, you could shop for the groceries, but these other people are making dinner. And it just didn't work out the way he wanted. So I'm incredibly disappointed and frustrated with it. This book was fine. I think the 139 was a little better, but I don't think either of them were to the caliber of the book we had last week. So if you go from fine to a little better, but still not way off the mark, you clearly have a problem you need to resolve. So speaking of.
So I will say this. I kind of wish the Armageddon game books were drawn like this because artistically speaking, these books are much better looking, much more beautiful. There were 5 panels in here where each turtle got kind of their own page while they're doing this test for learning a new skill that I thought were beautiful. And like I alluded to before, Shredder actually wasn't trying to pull anything on anybody. He was just trying to, again, help them. So I ate my words within about the first 2 panels of this book. I feel like this book, even though a lot didn't happen, so to speak, that it was very much necessary before the finale of Armageddon Game 8, whenever that's actually coming out. It fills a decent gap and actually has a purpose, I think, this time before we go into what the final battle or showdown is going to be. So it's this one was definitely good.
I like the art on this one. And actually, I do like when they are working through learning the different skills, the 10th cut. I thought it looked cool. But again, it's just more of that. It feels like we got one issue left and we're back to build up. You know? So.
I mean, I gotta agree, though. The art in this one is top notch, and completely agree with Sean. Those singular training pages, those could all be posters. Those things look amazing. I thought this was a really good issue. It does, though. It does feel like we're kind of taking that, one step forward, 4 steps back kind of thing, though. I'm. But near the end of this, I mean, for some reason, it's got me excited for the next issue. Like I'm kind of hoping they can build some momentum back up that they were gaining. But you know, again, definitely not the worst thing we've read this week, but definitely not as good as some of the other Turtles books we've read.
All right. So before we continue on, John has asked a question. Are you guys going to cover Opus books? I'm working on it. They were supposed to add us to their list, but I haven't seen any emails from them yet. John, I have to reach back out to the guy from Opus. You know, he was on vacation for a month after we talked. It's possibly forgot. It's possibly lost my business card. So reach back out to them. We are endeavoring to get more publishers books to read regularly. Just know that's something we're working on. It's just a little bit of a process with some of them. Some of these companies, you have to prove that you're legit. And so going through that process takes time. Jay and Sean, you already talked about Triangle of Truth. Dan, you talked about CinemaCon. What else are you going to be covering this week on the Dan Wickline show?
I don't know.
I liked your Marvel idea.
Yeah, I'm thinking of doing a basically writing a pitch on air with the audience helping out, taking a Marvel character that hasn't made the MCU yet and kind of rejiggering their story into the MCU, coming up with characters and story and plot. And, not that I'm going to pitch it to anybody. I don't have any direct connection. But I thought it'd be a fun exercise and get people involved.
That would be cool.
Very cool. And I think next Monday on Devil's Advocates, we're going to talk about what constitutes an actual first appearance and why so many people are wrong.
Yeah,
the biggest one that I've heard is the argument of Wolverine.
Yes.
Yep.
180 or 181, whether the one-page cameo versus the actual appearance.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
But then there's other ones that thrown in there too. We were talking about today on the show. We had what's the first appearance of Agent Coulson in comics. He appeared in a Walmart special add-in comic. So does that count as his first appearance, or does his first appearance is it Battle Scars #1 where he's introduced, but in there he doesn't get named until issue 6. He's known as Cheese in issue 1. So what the hell is his first appearance then?
Right. Gambit has the annual where there's a cameo, or the book where it's his actual first appearance, which is the first appearance of the black suit and Spider-Man. There are many, many of these things, and they've become increasingly divided because the speculator market is looking for books to push.
Mm-hmm.
So which books are they and what actually constitutes the first appearance? And we're going to break it down.
Speaking of, Dan, Gambit would be my suggestion for who to write a pitch.
I thought for sure if they were going to introduce Gambit, he was going to come on board Sam Wilson's boat in Captain and Winter Soldier because it's New Orleans and it kind of fits.
Mm-hmm.
I thought for sure that he was just going to be, I'm going to hire this deckhand and it's freaking Gambit. And I'm like, this is the best introduction to the X-Men ever.
And it's Taylor Kitsch again.
So, all right.
And a giant dog. Oh, wait.
All right. Continuing on. Dungeons and Dragons Saturday Morning Adventures #2.
All right. I got 2 problems with this book. And it's going to completely contradict Sean on something. This is the same artist as from Gargoyles. And I just don't like it. I don't like the art in either book. It just doesn't work for me, but that's just a personal thing. The other thing about this book that I'm really questioning is I think of Saturday morning cartoons and I think fun. I think, you know, that's what I remember from growing up. These fun stories, these light-hearted stories. This hasn't been fun. I haven't enjoyed reconnecting with these characters again. They're squabbling all the time, which vaguely remember that from the show, but it just feels like they're not, the lightheartedness that came along with the show isn't here. So, yeah, I mean, it's an interesting story. It feels more like a it feels like a Dungeons and Dragons story, but it doesn't feel like a Saturday morning adventure. So,
Jay?
Oh, okay. Well, so I wasn't here when y'all did the first issue, but I did download it. Just haven't read it yet. I vaguely remember the cartoon, and I'm not sure if this is based directly off of that or just the same basic premise of kids playing D&D and getting sucked into this world. Like I said, I vaguely remember, but I am a sucker for David Boer. I love his writing. I love pretty much everything he's written except for Firefly. Uh, but this is a little chaotic. Uh, I'm hoping the further we get in this, maybe the story gets a little tighter because it just kind of feels like Dan said. It just feels like kids fighting, and while that's realistic, I don't get that happy, joyous feeling I got watching cartoons on Saturday morning. It's just a bunch of kids fighting. Um, I'm definitely willing to continue it though, because like I said, I really enjoyed David's writing. So we'll just have to see how it goes.
So, not gonna lie, I had no idea this was a cartoon until y'all said it just now. I am definitely not a Dungeons and Dragons person. I know nothing really about the game, just that it exists and stuff like that. That said, I've come to trust David Boer and his writing over the few things that I have read. So for me, I actually thought this wasn't that bad. You don't have to be a D&D fan, I think, to enjoy the book, if you can enjoy the book. The bickering can get pretty old, but overall, I thought it was pretty good. I agree with you, Dan. The art is hit and miss. You'll either like it or you'll kind of be don't really care. But the best thing I can say about it is you don't have to like Dungeons and Dragons the game to enjoy this book, I think, and that's definitely something worth saying.
So I'm sort of half Sean, half Dan on this one, right? I really enjoy it, but I think only in as much as I'm just now consuming the cartoon show for the first time. Believe it or not, there's someone who streams them live on TikTok at night. And I found the guy and I just have been watching them because they're not really available to stream. So watching them with that on that TikTok, like I'm seeing them for the first time and I'm reading this comic and it really is enhancing my enjoyment. At the same time, Dan and I have had heated discussions about Dungeons and Dragons. I'm a very passionate Dungeons and Dragons player. I don't feel like the Dungeons and Dragons is important here.
I think that's why
I feel like it's just the framework they set the story into, and it doesn't have to be a Dungeons and Dragons story. And so in that respect, to me, it's disappointing. I would love there to be more. I'm not saying that the amount isn't fine for what they're doing. I would just love there to be more. I would love to see at the end of this book a campaign that you can play published with these characters in this world. Something to really kind of scratch that itch. The same way now that the Great British Bump Off is out, I want there to be a bake-along cookbook at the end. Right? I just want that to be a thing. And so I'm enjoying this book, but maybe not for the reasons I thought I would. And in my brain, there's a disconnect because of that. So,
See, what's funny is what you just talked about. D&D Beyond, which is part of D&D now, has character sheets available now for all the characters from the Honor Among Thieves movie, which is kind of what you were thinking for that type of thing. So you can go on there and play as those characters from the movie. But yeah, I don't think they have anything like that for this.
and maybe they will at the end. Like, I'm willing to give it time. Honor Among Thieves has been out for a few weeks. Like, I'm willing to give them time, but right now it's just there's this disconnect that needs to be tied up in my brain. So, Neighbors number 2. Man, do I wish this was a Mr. Rogers book. I'd enjoy it a lot more if this was about Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, but I don't want to know anything or learn any more about this one. This to me is a book that's just so wildly missing the mark, at least for me, that were it not for it being in the server, I would have just completely ignored it this week after the first issue. And now I certainly would after reading issue 2. It just is not at all anything I'm into or anything I want to be into. And I like horror. I like supernatural scary stuff. But you could be Evil Dead and you're not. So don't try to force me into something else. And this feels like it's trying to force me into a certain narrative, almost politically, and a certain narrative emotionally,
Mhm.
as opposed to letting me discover it. And it just is a miss.
I agree with you, but also one of my problems with the series is that it's also very telegraphed. It's like there's a moment in it where it's like, this stuff is really important. Everybody pay attention how important this stuff is. Oh, it gets destroyed. Who could have seen that coming? Yeah, it just, I don't know. I don't see the purpose of the series. I don't see what they're, if you're trying to entertain, then be entertaining. But if you're trying to tell a story or a message, it feels like they've got some elements that they want to push or to introduce the readers to, but the actual storytelling is just not that good.
Go ahead, Sean. I'll go last.
All right, so I can go both ways on this one. The agenda that it seems like they're pushing, especially from issue 1, not as much in this issue, but it's there, is annoying. It's one of those like just let me enjoy the book. That said, I can say that this one was definitely loads better than issue 1. Casey is creepy in this issue. That's the one thing I can definitely say that's the positive. She creeped me out. And I have a theory, even if we don't read this, I'll probably try to find out later. I wonder if somehow that the old lady that's their neighbor has possessed her. And that's what's going on. That's kind of my theory as to what the underlining thing is with this series. But this is also one of those, like, yeah, I'm curious to see if that theory pays off, but I don't really care if I don't ever read another issue of this series as well, just for the reasons I mentioned when I first started talking about it. It feels like there's too much trying to go in versus trying to give me a story, and I don't like it when that kind of stuff is put into comics. I'm here to read and just have a good time, and that's it. But, some people like that kind of stuff. Some people don't.
Yep. So, better than issue 1, still not my thing. Wasn't creepy. It was just weird. I don't get what's going on. If the next issue doesn't do something, I'm I'm out. That's all I got for this one.
Yeah.
What's going on in chat?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure that out myself. Holy cow.
That's hilarious.
So,
Okay, Dune, House of Harkonnen. I'm going to go first on this one mainly because I think I'm the only one that actually am digging the series and see all the connections it has to the Dune storyline.
I'm just going to go ahead and say you're wrong. I'm digging it with you.
Okay. Yeah, I know Kyle hates it. But Kyle hates it because he doesn't like the author. He's got a personal problem with that.
Well, but beyond that, I don't like it because, well, with this one, because it's not a Tremors story. But my problem is this, and I'll do my Dune thing, right? I have very little Dune background. I have very little interest in Dune. It was never something I was into. Kevin J. Anderson isn't my favorite person, but beyond that, this book assumes you know what you're getting into.
Yes.
If you don't know what you're getting into, you can't pick up this comic. It's no good. You can't. This is not a place to start a Dune story.
No, it's not.
Dune House Harkonnen isn't for new Dune readers. And so in the end of the day, if you haven't read previous Dune books, you haven't read the 75 million novels, you haven't watched the stupid show or movie, this book is not targeted at you. And so at the end of the day, I don't like it because it's not giving me a reason to.
I haven't read the 75 novels or any of that stuff. I've watched the Kyle MacLachlan version of the movie many years ago. Don't remember most of it. Watched the newer film when it came out on HBO Max. And I'm digging the hell out of this series. You're right. It's not for new readers. It's to add on to the mythos that is Dune. It's a prequel. It's giving you connections where it does make a lot more sense if you know what House Harkonnen is, what House Atreides is, why the Baron getting his anti-grav belt is important, all of those things, because it's adding to it. It's adding on to the mythos. So yeah, it's not for everybody. And that is, I could see that being a knock because, Stan Lee said that every comic is somebody's first comic. This is not going to make a lot of sense to a lot of people. But anytime you build into a universe, it becomes that way. How many comics do we pick up in issue 6, issue 8, and we try to read, and it's like, I have no idea what's going on.
Yeah.
That's what this is. This isn't, they're not trying to bring new readers in with this. They're trying to expand on the universe of Dune by giving us the connections that brings, that just adds to it. It's enriching the tapestry. It's not the start of it's not the corner of the thing.
But when you do that, don't you have an expectation or responsibility to the reader to give them a reason to care or to read the book?
No, you don't have. That's not something that it's not something that you have to do. It's something you should do if you want to gather more readers. But if that's not what they're trying to do, if they're aiming this at Dune audience and they don't care to add on more readers, then no, they don't necessarily have to do that. Is it a wise thing? No. Could they have spent more time making it more obvious? Yeah. Or connect the dots better. But if that's not what they wanted to do, they're just adding to the mythos. They didn't, when we picked up that Star Wars book today, they didn't sit down and explain what a Jedi was. They didn't explain what the Force is. They just assumed you knew what those things were, and then they went with the story. This is an odd book because it's telling us multiple points of view and multiple parts of the story and cutting in between. If now maybe it would have been better if they would have just took House Atreides or just House Harkonnen. Instead, they're jumping all over that time period. It's not for everybody. I agree. And do you hate it? I get it. I totally see what you're complaining about. I'm loving it because I do have the connection to it. I've seen the movie and I enjoy it. So, but not every comic needs to be, from a business point of view, every comic should be a first person's, written for the first time reader. It doesn't have to be. That's not what you want to do. It's going to hurt your sales, but you don't have to do it.
Yeah. So, real quick, when I was a kid, I got told that if I didn't take a bath, I would look like the Baron. That's what would happen to you if you didn't bathe.
That from wrong.
Your parents were Dune fans, huh?
Yeah. These stories to me are starting to connect a little better. I'm still a little lost, but that's because that Dune is the only Dune I've ever seen. I've never read any of the books or anything like that. I can't believe this is only issue 4 because it feels almost like the Armageddon game because there's so much story in these books, but it's not a bad thing. Like I'm not saying that it's bad, but for me personally, I really got to pay attention to what's going on, and what's being said. I think the main story is getting really good though. The one that's kind of like the through story in the books, and I'm interested to see where it goes.
Yeah, and I have even less experience. I knew nothing about Dune up until reading. I jumped on board on issue 2 or 3 of this series, so I came in even more lost than everybody else. That said, I think this is great. Even though this is my very first experience with Dune, the underlining story that goes through everything is getting really, really good. It's very twisty turny, and I like that. And then just overall the different points of view, the different worlds, they do a great job of drawing this book. So it's great to look at, but definitely make sure you read everything that is said, whether it's a thought, any little kind of exposition thought that's in there. Read it so that you'll know, but it is very, very enjoyable, even for someone like me who has zero experience with Dune whatsoever. I actually really like this.
I'd be curious when we're done with the series, if you would sit down and watch Dune, like it's on HBO Max or wherever you want to see it, and then see what you take away from it, because it's fascinating to me the idea that you'd be reading this first and then exploring the movie. So I kind of want to know what your thoughts on it after that.
Okay, I'll definitely do that.
Okay.
I'm going to go first.
Go ahead.
This is the palate cleanser. I had way too much fun reading this book, but I'm going to tell everybody right now, this is not safe for work. This is a porn as a book, and it is so much fun. This is my pick of the week just because I couldn't help but laugh. I was dying throughout the entire thing. And the language that the godlike beings used, for me, rolling. This is just a fun story. So that's all I got.
To me, this is what would happen if Trey Parker and Matt Stone wrote comic books. Tim Seeley is a great writer, and this is an example of his capabilities. I don't like the book. Didn't think it was great. I didn't like the first Money Shot series we did. But my God, after a week like we've had, I really did appreciate the amount of laughs this book gave me. For a book that I will never read another issue of. It's like that. It's like when the batteries run out on the remote and you're stuck on an episode of Seinfeld or South Park or American Dad, and you laugh more than you'd like to admit you laughed because, they're not particularly high quality comedy, but it's funny. And this is how I feel. So if you want to see more boobs and tentacles than they have any purpose being in a comic book, that isn't wrapped in a plastic bag, pick this one up. If you want highbrow, smart comedy, maybe watch The Three Stooges.
What do you think, Jay?
I love Vault. But I'm going to be really honest. I wasn't the biggest fan of the first series, and I'm not a fan of this one. It's too try-hard for me. I have the humor of a 12-year-old typing boobs on a calculator. None of this was funny to me. None of it. Let's put all the slang terms for genitalia and teach, these aliens to curse. That'd be funny, won't it? No, not at all. This book doesn't land anywhere with me, and I wouldn't mind if I didn't read another issue. Angers me.
Yeah. Kyle and Jay vote no to more issues, so we're definitely getting some.
Yeah.
I had kind of an interesting reaction to this book. I did not read the first one. Never had a chance. I thought the premise was pretty interesting. And I think it's because of having been a photographer, knowing a lot of models, seeing how the industry has changed from, to this point where we have OnlyFans and all of these, sites like that. I could see the premise that they put here of science having to use pornography to get funding. Totally buy that. And I think that, again, there wasn't a lot of story. There wasn't a lot to grab me on this, but the premise is interesting. I like the art. Giselle Legace is great. I'm kind of curious to see where this is going to go. I love the fact that we got like right up to the point of tentacle porn, and then they pull back from it. Just shows that this isn't just straight out give them the worst that they can get. But yeah, I'm kind of curious where this goes, and now I kind of want to read the previous series because the concept is interesting to me. Now it needs to do something in issue 2. There needs to be some action or something happening for me to want to read more of these. But I am kind of curious to
use
see.
of word action, Dan.
Yeah. Plus, there's all the hatred towards the owner of the company, which is pretty much Jeff Bezos.
The title of this book could be BEWBS, boobs, and it would be the same book.
No, there's a lot of political stuff going on in here that I.
Sure, but there were a lot of boobs too.
Yeah.
Both men and women. It's gender.
Like you guys, I am completely offended by nudity in comics and would, wholly recommend away from that. But
yeah.
No, I thought it was kind of clever, and I want to see what they're going to do next.
All right, guys. Just a reminder, it's really important to us that you visit your local comic shop. To find a local comic shop near you, head over to localcomicsshoplocator.com, comicsshoplocator.com, type in zip code, area code, whatever. Type in the numbers of the place where you are, and it will tell you where there are comic shops nearby to you. We have to get out of here so that Jay can go do Minutes to Skim It. But we'll see everybody next week. Bye.